And then I think the other thing that's important as well, that between State Department and the work that we're doing with NGA, it's not just about understanding the terrain, it's understanding the people, the human geography, understanding the cultural dynamics, the things that make it unique. Those are also important, and having that context in terms of knowing how it is that you can help. And that geography is part of our mission as well. So it's not just the satellite imagery, it's understanding all aspects of that to provide to in terms of assistance.
Hey, SpaceWatchers, this is Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, awesome events, and interesting people in the space sector. During the 39th Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, I had the opportunity to talk with Sandra Auchter, head of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA's, office in Denver, Colorado. I was talking with Sandra in the very noisy environment in one of the lobbies of the Broadmoor Hotel about the work of the NGA and their support for humanitarian work. In an example, she explains the tight interlink operations with the requesting entity. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. Lean back and get a look behind the curtain of NGA's work. Hey SpaceWatchers, and welcome back. We have the great honor to talk with Sandra Auchter, the head of the NGA office in Denver. Sandra, welcome to the Space Café Radio. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
It's a pleasure to talk to you too. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk about some of our mission with you.
This all came together after my visit at the DGI, and I listened to your director and was really impressed about the variety of services that you can talk in public. And that's what we are here to talk to the public about the missions. But first of all, can you allude a bit what the NGA is, what the role of the NGA is to our audience?
Absolutely. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is one of, I think, 17 now intelligence agencies in the IC. And then we're also a combat support agency with our Department of Defense. So we have two bosses that my director has to report to. We have our headquarters is in what we call NGA Washington in Springfield. And our second largest site is in NGA St. Louis, our other core site. And NGA Denver is our third largest concentration of personnel here in Colorado, which is great because it's an ecosystem of other geospatial industry and aerospace industry as well. Large federal presence, and it's very appropriate, I think, that we're here talking in Colorado Springs at the Space Symposium about what it is that we do.
What are you doing? What is the role of the head of a regional office?
We have lots of different offices around the world, making sure that we're able to be in those places. NGA Denver is a little bit different. We do our core mission. It's not support to whoever is our host. So most of the organizations that are within our headquarters back at NGA Washington are resident in Colorado as well. And so it's basically doing the care and feeding of all of the personnel that are there. We're doing operations. I manage the team at ADF Colorado, Aerospace Data Facility, Colorado, and I'm co-located there with the National Reconnaissance Office, which manages the site, and then the National Security Agency as well. So in addition to managing the team that's there for NGA Denver, I'm also responsible for maintaining the relationships and that collaboration with those two agencies as a tri-agency. We have a humanitarian mission as well, leveraging satellites primarily that are launched from NRO, who's a good partner with us as well. And so we analyze all of that data in support of national security and a humanitarian missions as well.
You don't own the satellites that are providing the data, so you're just on the analytics side, right?
Absolutely. So we are responsible for the tasking, the prioritization, and then the exploitation. So I started out years ago before we were NGA as an analyst and leveraging the satellites that NRO puts up to do analysis on high current mission areas.
If you hear a lot of background noises here, dear Space Watchers, that's why we are sitting here in a lobby, and it seems that everyone has something to do here by cleaning, by opening, closing the doors, and just doing noises. But we hope our best that we can eliminate these noises. Thank you very much for clarifying this. Let's talk about the things that we can talk, the humanitarian work you're doing. Can you start with an overview? So what kind of humanitarian work that entails before we go then into one or two concrete examples?
So before we go into that, I did want to say, again, thank you so much for having me and having me talk about one of my favorite topics. And the reason that, I love to say yes to these kinds of interviews is because I think we have a responsibility as public servants to talk about the work that we do, not to reveal sources and methods. I've been in this business for 20 some years, and we have a very hard time talking in public about what it is that we do. And I think in this environment that we're in right now, where there's a lot of public distrust of the government, anything dealing with intelligence or defense, anytime we have an opportunity to talk about what it is that we do that is beneficial to our American taxpayers, we should be able to do that. So I will take every opportunity to talk about that anytime I can.
So go for it.
We can talk about lots of different areas. I will focus on more recent kinds of challenges and issues. And again, I can talk about some of the tools. I'll talk about some of the people that are doing the response as well. So last year we had devastating fires in Maui in August. And again, one of the things I'm really proud of is that our agency has this mission that we've been part of the work that we do for decades. And so we have it down to a science. We definitely have to have a lead federal agency ask for our assistance. We can't just offer it. And within 5 days of those fires in Maui, FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, asked NGA to help provide assistance. So I think within 24 hours of their ask, we had 2 analysts go out to provide assistance. And again, we talk about the tools and the things that they're providing. I will say the humans that will pick up and go into harsh areas, right, and leave their families for however long they need to in order to help their fellow Americans. It says a lot about our agency, and there are folks that are willing to do that all the time.
The people are then, your team is then on site?
Absolutely. Yeah. So they go and they're co-located, I like to say coffee breath close with the lead agencies and the first responders. And they're providing any assistance that they can. And so one of the first things that you're going to need in those types of situations is situational awareness. So I like to say that geospatial intelligence or anything geospatial is the foundational int, because no matter what situation that you're in, you're going to need to know where you are, what is the situation, what's the environment, and that's right in our area. Our team went out there and they were providing before and after shots of each of the affected areas for the responders, and then for folks who didn't know what had happened to their homes to be able to give them context that they wouldn't have before. But they're not going on their own. So I think we had 2 people that went. They have a whole agency that's supporting them as well. And so they're reaching back to our folks that have the right data, trying to get the most current data that they can in order for them to be able to support those lead federal agencies.
I was wondering that you have people on site when your work is the analytics of data, of pictures, and providing these data, these pictures then to the people in need, to the first responders. Mm-hmm. Help me to understand what kind of data these are. I think we talk about high resolution pictures from areas.
One of the things when I first started was an amalgamation of a bunch of different agencies. And I think a lot of folks now are familiar with overhead imagery. They've seen it before from a commercial perspective, where when I started, we didn't have that. It was all national security and it was national agencies providing it. And so the image itself is being provided, but also all of the things that are around it, all of the terrain that's there as well, what's the telecommunications, all of those critical things that the first responders are going to need to know. Is the road passable? Is it not passable? Right? All of those things are extremely important. Where do they need to focus most? Is this area okay, but this one isn't? Obviously, the first things that they're going to need to do is to look for folks who were injured, maybe weren't found. At that point, it was probably past the time for rescue. But those are all of the things that the context that they need to provide. So it's not just enough to have images that show you what's on the ground, you have to have the data within that as well, and the right kind of data depending on what the first responders are looking for. That is important as well. And I think having the experiences that we've had, unfortunately, for lots of disasters, we know exactly the kinds of data that first responders are going to need, how they need to get it. I often talk about a tool, it's called MAGE, and I'll have to refer, again, the acronyms are always a challenge for me. It's Mobile Awareness Geospatial Environment. And what this does is it provides geospatial data, it provides maps, overviews, anything that you're going to need. But the key to this is that it's provided in a way that recognizes that you're in an austere environment and that you don't have potentially telephone, you need satellite radio, et cetera. It's what we call a disconnected environment. And so what are those key things that you're going to need from a geospatial perspective to give you situational awareness so that you can do your job? And I think over the last 20 years or so, it's been trial and error about what exactly do people need? Is it just the imagery? What are the kinds of data that they're going to need? And again, I think our agency has it down to a science.
In this kind of environment, many agencies are involved to provide their services. How are they coordinated? I mean, maybe that's very obvious for an American, but for us as international audience, that's interesting to see how these huge bodies are interacting with each other, that at the end, you do it to the benefit of people in need and not coordinating for the purpose of coordinating things.
It's probably more art than science for how that's coordinated. I will tell you, after 9/11, one of the things that our country found was that there was not enough communication between our federal and local government. And so we've done a lot over the last 20 years or so to make sure that those seams are a lot better. And again, I think particularly our engagement with FEMA, as they're generally the first responders when there's a crisis, we've had folks embedded within that organization through our Department of Homeland Security, primarily, who are focused on what are the things that these agencies are going to need in order for us to be able to provide the right kinds of data for them. Who are the people that are going to be needed in those crisis cells that are there to support so that they're operating together? And it could be local law enforcement, fire and rescue, FEMA, obviously, and then our agency as well. But I think FEMA, as the lead agency, has that responsibility for sort of organizing what are the different agencies that are going to need to be around them. And it seems to be working well.
You mentioned before that your work includes foreign areas. How does the humanitarian work is initiated outside the US? So how can one asking you for help?
For things that are for disaster response that are overseas, it's primarily through the State Department. And so they're our first entry into, hey, we need additional assistance. This is the type of assistance that this country has requested. And so working through our ambassador and our State Department, providing the kind of data that they're going to need. And again, I think it's really important, and it's a testament to how far we've come, that a lot of this data before, and even just the policies and the ways that we're able to transfer data, we didn't really have a good mechanism for that before. But I think our agency over the years, because this has been such a key mission area for us, we have policies in place to provide the kind of assistance that's needed very quickly. We have PICS is a sort of open portal for people to be able to access very quickly geospatial data. PICS stands for Protected Internet Exchange. There's an international disaster response. It's usually the State Department that reaches out and says, hey, there's been a request from a country for assistance. And again, we have a playbook to be able to provide information.
Let me jump in here. Is there a kind of catalog of services? Because how does a foreign entity knows what they can ask? Or is it more general, we just need help? What can you provide? On what level is that?
I think for probably 99% of the time, as I said before, GeoInt is the foundational int. First and foremost, everybody wants to see a broad picture and to get situational awareness of the area that's affected. They want to be able, especially if it's not navigable, if it's an earthquake or flood, you're not able to get to that area. They want to be able to know what they're dealing with. And if you're talking about going in and doing rescues, again, it's really important to understand and know where the routes are, where it is that you can navigate and can't navigate. And so although each disaster may be very specific to that country, I think that first and foremost of having that situational awareness is really absolutely critical. And so there's an assumption there that is something that they're absolutely going to need. What did it look like before and what did it look like after? And then I think the other thing that's important as well, that between State Department and the work that we're doing with NGA, it's not just about understanding the terrain, it's understanding the people, the human geography, understanding the cultural dynamics, the things that make it unique. Those are also important. And having that context in terms of knowing how it is that you can help. And that geography is part of our mission as well. So it's not just the satellite imagery, it's understanding all aspects of that to provide in terms of assistance. We do have relationships, partnerships with other countries as well, where we're already sharing data. Okay. So that makes it a little bit easier. It's when you don't have more formal relationships where it can be challenging.
Are you working also with NGOs together, provide services to them or provide data to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that the resources that we have that we leverage in one area, being able to do that for NGOs, for their assistance and help is absolutely critical. Again, I think it's important to talk about the fact that we have tools that are developed for one area that we're using for the benefit and service to others.
In our pre-talk, you mentioned this concept of trust, and I would like you to explain that a bit further. Maybe you can give us an idea what that means.
I think we're in an era where there's a lot of sharing, social media and Facebook and all of those things. But the concept of sharing everything and being open and transparent, I laugh about the fact that my husband and I go to breweries and we take pictures of our food if it's really good and then we post it. Like, that's insane. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have done that. But I think from a national security perspective, where we go into work every day in a vault behind locked doors without windows, and we just don't talk about the work that we do. We were just trained in that manner. And I think the public kind of demands, just because that's the environment that we're in, that we be a lot more open. And there are things that we can talk about that, again, are not revealing sources and methods and secrets. We can talk about the playbook. We can talk about our values and how we use those values in order for us to make decisions on behalf of the American people. We're here in Colorado. It's beautiful. I like hiking here and doing things on the weekend. And I want the public to know that they have thousands of Americans across the world that are working to keep them safe so that they can enjoy doing these things and have the freedom to be able to do that. And I don't think we talk about it enough, having been back in D.C., which is the center of our government, and now I'm living here in Colorado. It's a much different environment, much different concerns. And so the things that happen in D.C. that are normal for me, it's not a priority here. Trying to make sure that we're not disconnected from the people that we're serving is really important. And so because we haven't had a voice, we haven't talked about what it is that we do, talked about being of service to the public, others have been able to have their own narrative about what it is that we represent. And we just have to be a lot more transparent so that we can help to reestablish that trust.
Sandra, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to get a bit of an insight about what you guys are doing. And with that, good luck and thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
If you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.